Hey, what's up, everybody? It is the Rewind here on the Pregame Show Network. I'm Tolly Carr in Atlanta. Uncle Neely joining us in 1 second. We got a lot to talk about today. We got Shiloh Sanders. He's keeping receipts on all of his stats. Stacking days. What's behind all this stacking days? We're going to get to the bottom of that. We got scrimmages. We got emails we want to talk about. We got to ask Unc. There's a whole lot going on the Rewind. Let's get right to it. Let us join my man now, Uncle Neely. He is in Boulder, Colorado. Big Unc, what's up, man? How you doing?
What's going on, Tolly Carr? Always a pleasure to be with you on the Rewind.
Absolutely, man. Let's jump right into the big buzz of the week, what people are talking about. Shiloh Sanders critiquing his critics. Neely, this happened just right in front of your camera lens as always. Walk us through how it transpired, then we'll get into what Shiloh had to say.
You know, I was embedded with the defense. We were having practice number 6. And it was going to be one of those more upbeat tempo, heated practices. And I was kind of trailing Shiloh Sanders around on the sideline. And he just said, you know what? I got something I want to say. And he just started addressing everyone who says he can't tackle. You know, he broke down the difference between hitting and tackling and how the critics don't know football if they feel he's not one of the best safeties. He has got a chip on his shoulder, and he's standing behind his words, and he says, watch me now.
All right, so the big thing that he talked about, in case you haven't seen it, you can check it out on the YouTube channel here at the Pregame Show Network. You can also check it out at thepregameshow.com. Very easy to find. One of the big things he talked about was his missed tackle rate, which was at 12%. So we'll do the math for you. For every 100 tackle attempts, he missed 12, which means he tackles the opponent 88 times. He advised everyone, Neely, to go to Pro Football Focus, have your $90 ready, and download the stats because stats don't lie. I don't know. That's a good number? 12%? That's good?
I would take it in any business. If you told me I was going to have an 88% success rate, I'd sign up for whatever that is. You know, maybe sometimes one of those 12 tackles could come at a bad moment in the game or be on the goal line or something. And it just looks worse than it is. But statistically speaking, he's spot on. One of the more sound tacklers in college football.
Led one of the highest numbers. I don't want to say number one, although it could have been, but when it comes to forced fumbles and his ability to pry the ball loose, I mean, he's up there with the best in the country at doing that, at least from last year's stats.
Yeah, absolutely he is. And the opponents know it. The referees know it. His teammates know it. He's a ball hawk. He flies to the ball. He enjoys hitting hard. Some of his critics say he should be more focused on wrapping up. But I tell you this, wrapping up doesn't jar the ball loose. This guy created turnovers, created fumbles, flipped field position for his team by being known as a hard hitter. He calls himself the CEO of the headache gang. And he's telling all his critics, if you think I can't tackle, you don't know football.
Neely, every football team needs a thumper, though. It's more about, look, textbook, hit them wherever you need to hit them. I'm not a football player, never played, but like just having those pure tacklers is great. But you need a guy on your team that when that receiver's coming over the middle or it's a tight window along the sidelines, in the back of his mind, he's thinking, where's Shiloh? Because I know if I don't keep track of him, he might take my head off.
That's exactly what you want, Tolly. And if you're going to have it, why not have it be the safety? And if it's going to be the safety, why not be Shiloh Sanders? I think also one of the biggest things we're missing in this new age and era of college football, or even professional football, because professional sports even, you'll see Draymond Green has his own podcast and responds to people. You know, we're living in an era now that you just can't say what you want to say on the internet about somebody. They get to what's called clap back. And Shiloh Sanders does not mind clapping back. And he's going to be one of those vocal guys on his team that when you come for him, he's going to come back. You saw a lot of comments say, hey, man, let your play do the talking. This is April. We don't start playing on August 31st. There's no way he was going to be quiet all that time.
Right. You can't let your play from practice do the talking because you don't get to see that. So he definitely clapped back and he had the receipts. And if you're a grown man, I'll just speak to the men out there. If you're a grown man arguing with someone, a young person, on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever, who's out there doing something that you never did before, just take a look in the mirror. Like, just enjoy the show. But I've never understood old people arguing with young people that ain't their children.
I have nothing to add to that. Maybe the church organ.
Like, why? Why are you doing this? All right, Neely, one of the things that we hear a lot, we hear it a lot from Rob Livingston, the new defensive coordinator at Colorado, stacking days. They've been talking to you. They've been talking about stacking days. Neely, peel a layer of that onion back. What is behind stacking days? What have they been stacking? Do you like what you have seen that has been stacked here in, 7-8 practices at Colorado?
I love what I'm seeing here taking place in Colorado, particularly on the defensive side of the ball under new DC Robert Livingston, who came here from 12 years with the Cincinnati Bengals. And here's what he means by stacking days. We're going to get it right. We're going to make sure before we move on that we have this first foundation, this first layer down pat, that we have it right. You have a lot of coaches in this space that they're on their timetable, they're on their install. Whether you get it or not, we're moving on. Livingston is one of those guys like your math teacher back in elementary, Tolly. We're not moving to the next part of math until you get this, because the next part is based on this. So what he's looking for is the best 11 players. Let's stack days and make sure we understand the terminology, understand our assignment and what technique and how we're playing the ball on this particular call. And we don't move on to the next thing until this 11 guys understand it and got it and can execute it.
Very good point there. You talked to Shane Coates earlier this week. He talked about taking the open hand and making it a fist when it comes to that defensive line. There was a lot of expectations on Coates last year. He started the first 8 games, kind of fell out of the starting rotation, finished the last game, Utah, back in that starting mix with the defensive line. How beneficial will it be for him to step his game up a little bit? How much?
I think he's there.
Know.
Yeah, I think he's there. I think it has stepped up. He came here as a graduate student, Ivy League graduate from Dartmouth, came here for Coach Prime's first year, staying here for his second year graduate school, leader on that defensive line, cerebral guy as it comes to the approach of the game, worked on his body, strengthened his technique during the offseason. He's looking in football shape right now. He's really meshing well with the new guys who come in for that defensive line. And he's always just aiming to get better and to not only lead that line, to make sure he's leading by example. So I like what I'm seeing in Shane. I like his demeanor, what he's learning in his new defense, what his role is going to be. I think that one of the key upgrades that this team had to have was defensive line, offensive line, tight end. And we saw that happen. We saw this defensive line get upgraded through the portal, offensive line upgraded through the portal, and still trying to figure out who's going to be that starting tight end in the rotation right now. But the arrow's pointing up on the D-line, and I think Shane Coates is at the tip of that arrow.
Talk about that connection between the defensive line and the back-end players in the secondary. If that D-line can get more pressure on the quarterback, more hurries, more tip balls, all the things that happens when you can outman that offensive line that's standing in front of you, how will that help the tremendous, what I think is a tremendous secondary, of course, with Travis Hunter, Shiloh Sanders doing his thing from the safety position. Talk about that correlation between up front and back end.
I think on the back end, the result is going to be these guys get to play a little freer. These guys get to really ball hawk, head hunt, go for the ball for interceptions versus just trying to stop a big play from happening. One of the things that get lost, and when Shiloh was making his statements about people criticizing him, is later on in his next interview and Robert Livingston's next interview, they talked about how dominant and improved this defensive line is and how it is helping the back end. You'll see Shiloh say, like, man, I was pretty bored out there today because they were cleaning everything up front. I didn't have anything to do. When this time a year ago, he was leading the team in tackles at practice and even in the season because he was the last line of defense stopping that big run. Well, now with this improved D-line, improved linebacker core, now the corners and the safeties really get to play their true roles and go after that ball and try to flip the field with a turnover versus last year they were kind of holding in place, trying to fly downhill and stop a run because we just gave up the run so many times. I like what this new D-line is giving an opportunity to the back end, to the secondary.
You're watching The Rewind. This is the Pregame Show Network. I'm Tali Carr. He is Uncle Neely. Neely, one of the best things I saw, and this wasn't on the Pregame Show Network. It was on Coach Prime's IG. I might have been on Facebook. hell, I might have been on Twitter. It was one of Coach Prime's accounts, and it was this new thing he was doing with like first person where you just saw the camera was mounted somewhere around his face because everything you saw was just his hands, his teaching, and you saw practice in front of him. And he was talking to the DBs. I mean, just, stuff that anybody who knows about playing that position, but to hear it from Coach Prime, man, you could just sit there and listen to it all day. Telling players to get low, like, hey, you were good for about 80% there, but you need to tighten up this one thing. Neely, you get to hear that every day, man, but that has got to be like, for me, that was the coolest thing, to just sit there and rewind that reel and listen to it over and over.
Absolutely it is. He wears this kind of harness, this chest harness, and the camera's about mid-chest. I don't know if it's a GoPro or what brand it is, but the camera is just below his chin, about mid-chest, and that's why you pick up the hands, because he talks with his hands. Maybe he's part Italian or something. He's always talking with his hands. And people are really getting to experience how much he actually coaches this team. One of the biggest knocks on Deion Sanders, even back at Jackson State, even coming to Colorado, is, he's just a celebrity. He doesn't actually coach. He just hires people. He doesn't actually do the coaching. When you watch those videos from that first-person cam, or when you're watching the pregame show and you see the footage there, you see how involved he is in coaching. But particularly those cornerbacks and DBs in the defense, because that's where his experience is. But, he'll stop a play to talk to the offensive line or the quarterback, his son. So he's highly immersed in the coaching here taking place at practice. And through that first-person prime cam, you really get to see it and witness it.
Yeah, I think the critics are on to something. The greatest cornerback of all time probably has nothing to offer in practice. I don't know why I didn't see through this earlier. It's just been a ruse the whole time. Neely, one thing that Coach Prime is really good at is product placement, because part of that video, I saw he had that Pepsi in his hand, and he was talking, and that Pepsi kept showing up in the shot. I was like, that's marketing, baby. That's
oh yeah,
that's marketing.
You're going to see some Pepsi around here. You're going to see some Red Con One, because he's not just a partner with him; he drinks it. And one thing about that camera that's around his neck, you really don't see it. It blends in with his clothes. It's kind of underneath. And so none of this stuff is like a put on or just for the camera. He is out there coaching like he does, whether the cameras are rolling or not. He's drinking a Pepsi or a Redcon One, whether the cameras are rolling or not. You're truly getting to see and hear Deion Sanders as he is at practice.
I'm glad you told us where the position is, because there was one video that we had on the Pregame Show Network where Coach Prime was at the front of the, I think the room that you're in right there, talking, and I could see something was under his shirt. And for me, it looked like my pot belly. I was like, I know Coach Prime ain't got a pot belly. So it had to be the harness that was under the shirt and covered up. So I'm glad you told me that, because I was trying to figure out what is under his shirt, because I know he ain't working with what I'm working with over here.
That's what it was. That's the camera harness.
All right. So when he was in front of that room, we saw a video this week where Coach Prime got an email. And if you were a member of the team and you were the subject of that email, this was probably not a good week for you. Because while we would love to think that every single player is doing every single thing they're supposed to do in college, it is college. It is young people. People don't always pay attention. They always don't know what's going on. They get a little distracted. So Neely, one of the teachers sent the email pointing out that a couple of the players just, had to keep telling them stuff over and over and over. And Coach Prime, he made his point, and he kind of did it in an old school way, Neely.
He absolutely did. I think a lot of folks think that we only show the good of this program, that we're unwilling to show the bad and the ugly in this process. And when you saw that clip, that was just another indication of how open he is to what we're building here. And he understands that the student and student athlete comes first. He also understands that if you're not eligible as a student, you can't play. So we have to go to class and have to perform well in class. So he gets an email from a teacher that was complaining about a group of football players that all attended this class. And the professor just laid out the facts from their vantage point of as far as who's participating, who's not. And he went through the names and through what they were being accused of doing or not doing in the class. And it was not a good day for those players or that meeting to take place, because it wasn't just those players. He made sure we knew as a team, because he has accountability groups. And if the player who got called out by the professor was in your accountability group, it's like you were messing up in class too.
And one of the things that he did, he made the correlation between, all right, you're not doing what you're supposed to do in class. What did he say, Neely? Put their draft grade up. And let me see if they're an NFL prospect. So the point he was making is, how do you do one thing? You do one thing like you do all things. So if you're not on track to be where you are athletically or academically, at some point, as hard as these things are, you got to look in the mirror and say, all right, the common denominator in all these shortcomings is you. And I think that was the point.
Yeah, he has done a phenomenal speech here, man. Issue, ISSUE, and he'll have the class, the players, the students stand up, if you will, and say, now say issue. And everybody says it. And he said, now listen to what you're saying. You're saying it's you. So if you have an issue with something, according to Coach Prime, more times than not, it's you who's causing the issue. And so he tells players all the time when he talks about discipline, if you don't show up for breakfast on time, you don't show up for team meetings on time, those are the same guys who jump off sides on 3rd and 5. Those are the same guys who get unnecessarily roughness penalties and give the ball back to somebody. He talks about discipline ad nauseum, drills into these players, that it starts in class and your behavior and what you're doing in team meetings. If we can't count on you off the field, how can we count on you on the field? And as you so eloquently tied together, Tolly, if you're getting bad grades in class, you probably got a bad draft grade too. And there was the correlation.
Yes. Look at that man in the mirror. There's a lot of answers there if you are brave enough to take a look. I see a lot of answers on mine. I got some issues here too, Neely. All right, scrimmage. Did you see any issues in scrimmage number 1? I heard the defense talking like they gave some issues to the offense. What did you see out there, Neely?
Well, one quick correction. This past Saturday was not a scrimmage. It was just a practice. Okay. There's a threshold of tackling plays and that kind of thing before it officially is a scrimmage. We were well under that threshold, so it was just practice number 6. You get 3 scrimmages in the spring. One of them is the spring game, so we will have between now and then two true scrimmages, referees, officials, that kind of thing. But that was just a practice, high-energy practice, pads on. What I saw was what Coach Prime was expecting. He was expecting the arrow to be pointing up. He was expecting high energy. He was expecting people to bring it. Tolly, I tell you, the challenge here is don't rest on we're better than we were last year. This team, unit by unit, position by position, athlete by athlete, is better than it was last year. But we got to make sure we're not settling just on that. We can't rest on that this offensive line is revamped and better than last year. We got to make sure this offensive line is living up to its potential. That's the real challenge here, because even the players who you expect to be better are better. Travis Hunter is better than he was last year. Shiloh Sanders, healthier, better than he was last year. Night and day difference between this April and last April.
So we always hear in these practices, defense is ahead of the offense. Anytime you start something, new in football, whether it be spring or fall, it's always, defense is ahead of the offense. Would you say that's the case? Because a lot of the conversation, and maybe it's just because, we got a new defensive coordinator, new faces out there. We're getting a lot of talk and chatter from that defensive side. Do they look a step ahead to you? Do things look equal based on the limited amount of, head-to-head there? In practice, since you have that threshold with the scrimmages like you explained?
I think we have enough data points that we can say the defense is slightly ahead because they've been more consistent. What I love about this thing, though, is if on Tuesday the defense wins, Thursday the offense come back and they win. They don't fold and just accept it. And that's something that you didn't have last year. You had consistent domination by 1 or 2 players or one unit over the other. This year, you get me today, you're not going to get me tomorrow. So there's a lot of back and forth. But I would still say, as typically it is in football this time of year, defense is slightly ahead of the offense.
Do we have a set date for when the first scrimmage will be, or is that kind of a fluid thing? Like, hey, we want to see when we get to a point where we feel like a scrimmage will be beneficial?
It can be fluid as far as you just articulate with beneficial, but I would bank on that the next 2 Saturdays. We have the spring game on Saturday, April 27th. So I would say the 2 Saturdays before that, more than likely at this point, will be scrimmages versus a weekday practice. We're probably going to do it on one of those Saturdays.
All right. Looking forward to that. One of the things that I noticed over the week, I was on vacation last week, took my family to Disney, had a great time. I no longer have money in my bank account, but did have a great time. But one of the new things I saw, just kind of, flipping through the phone there, was Ask Uncle Neely, a special segment that you have brought out where the fans just get to chime in and ask Uncle Neely questions. How did it go, Unc? It looked like a rousing success.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing it. This is something that Alexis Neely cooked up. And so many people were making comments on the YouTube and Instagram and TikTok that she just started looking at some of the questions and created this segment called Ask Uncle Neely. So it's something we're going to do on a regular basis. So when you see videos like this, or you want to email us, man, ask us a question. We're going to put it in the bowl, and we're going to eventually answer all of them that we can time-wise. But even if it's just because you find some strength and conditioning coach attractive, we'll address that because we got that question. So that's what we did.
Yeah, I can see that's in the inbox there. So Neely, one of the things that you expounded upon in the Ask Neely is the ongoing expansion, the plans for the Pregame Show network. On our website, thepregameshow.com, this week we've had guest posts from contributors who are just fans that wanted to write an article, and it passed our process and posted to the site. And look, you've got a list of cities that you look at, and according to what you said, Neely, like, there could be new faces. That's something that you're going to be welcoming here at the Pregame Show Network.
Absolutely, Todd. They're going to be welcoming it and encouraging it. We have grown to over 100,000 subscribers. The cities that we're reaching, the impact that we're having there is phenomenal. The number of views in Atlanta, in Houston, in Dallas, in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Charlotte, cities like Memphis. We're going to be talking to content creators in those markets and inviting them to come part of the Pregame Show network. The Pregame Show itself, the things I do with Coach Prime in Colorado football, is not going anywhere. But the Pregame Show network is certainly going to start diversifying and showing other content for reaching this market space that we have. Blessed to have over 100,000. The number of views that are coming from Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles are just through the roof. So content creators in those areas, if that's your thing, doesn't have to be sports. We'd love to have you part of the network.
Well, unlike my hair, the Pregame Show network is growing. I like it, Neely. I like it a lot. Maybe we can get somebody who can, give us some natural, superfoods, juices, things that you can, take in that will, promote hair growth. Because I can't afford Coach Prime's, man. So I need some natural plant-based things to get this party
Maybe we
going
can
back.
Maybe I can donate some of my beard to your head.
Just the black strands.
Oh, just okay.
Give me some.
Not too many of those left though.
Give me some of that prime meat up there, man. That's like bison meat. Those lean cuts. I don't need any of that gray stuff. I got plenty of that. Man, I've been looking at Facebook memories, Neely, just from 4 years ago. I'm like, wow, looked a little different up there. Like time is just speeding up right on top of my head. And I am not.
Yeah, I can remember when this was all black 5 years ago. Right before the pandemic, this was all black.
Yeah.
Now?
It happens. 5-0. It happens, baby. All right, Neely, brother, it's always good to catch up with you. What is one thing, although this is a rewind, we've kind of looked back as we look forward to this full week of practice. What is the one thing, couple of things that you are really looking forward to keeping your eye on that we might be talking about in next week's Rewind?
The consistency of the next week. You now have 7 practices under your belt. You get 15 counting that spring game. Are we going to do like Coach Livingston says in stack days? Or are we going to burn a day or two because we had some regression? So what I'm looking for is continued momentum, continue to embrace Coach Prime's philosophy, and make sure we're doing just that, stacking days and getting better with each practice, because you don't get a lot of practices. You get 15 total, and one of those is the spring game, so it's truly 14. We now have 7 in the books. We can't waste any of them.
Halfway home, this is The Rewind, the Pregame Show Network. For Uncle Neely, I am Tali Carr. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you soon right here.